Once you already tell me, my brother. You're the one sitting in the younger. You must be done. Honorable Muniswa, the chair directs that you leave your head hanging there. You just leave it.
And the chair likes the thing, right?
No, I just said just leave it.
And you want to actually... That's the point. You like
Yeah.
I suspected so.
Shaita.
Yes.
Okay. So, good morning, members of the Fourth Estate. Today, the 21st of September 2020, we were supposed to receive evidence from the Secretary of Finance, Mr. George Guvamatanga, and his team that consists in particular Mr. Jandasara, the Acting Accountant General, and Fungwa Kunaka, the Principal Director of Budgets, in respect of the Financial Adjustment Bill, which has been read, which has gone through its first reading in Parliament, and which has been referred to this committee for analysis. As you will recall, we had Mr. Jandasara and Mr. Kunaka appear before us a few weeks ago, actually a few months ago, before the lockdown. In other words, before the 30th of March 2020. And what we learned and what we agreed with officials was that, number one, the Financial Adjustment Bill, which seeks condonation of the sum of US $10.6 billion spent by government without parliamentary approval, without a budget to back it up for the years 2015 to 2018. So the $10.6 billion was for the periods of 2015 to 2018. However, the bill as presented did not have the 10.6 billion US dollars disaggregated ministry by ministry or vote by vote and year by year. So we agreed with the committee that they would disaggregate the figures in the Financial Adjustment Bill so that we would know what particular ministry overspent in 2015, on 2016, in 2017, in 2018, on its own for the 20 or so ministries that are there. We were also shocked to learn from the ministries and from the two officials, Mr. Jandasara in particular as the Accountant General, that the 10.6 billion US dollars was in fact over expenditure on over expenditure. In other words, the 10.6 billion US dollars was already extra over expenditure on the recorded budget deficits for the year 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. That is already known and acknowledged by government. For instance, we know that the deficit in 2017 was 2.7 billion. The deficit in 2018 was $3.5 billion. The 10.6 billion US dollars represents expenditure over expenditure. Therefore, it also meant that these books had not been audited by the Accountant General. And we as Parliament cannot condone something that hasn't gone through the scrutiny of the Auditor General in terms of the powers she has in terms of the Constitution. So we asked the ministry officials to set out and define a timeline in respect of which they will complete the disaggregation process. Once they've completed the disaggregation process, they will then forward the books of accounts capturing the over expenditure of 10.6 billion US dollars to the Auditor General. This is why we have been requesting those officials to come and give evidence to us as to when they will hand over the books for auditing to the Auditor General, the esteemed Mrs. Chile. So that's why we want them here. The second thing which we agreed in that meeting was that they will seek an opinion from the Attorney General, Mr. Advocate Prince Machar, on the meaning of Section 307 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Section 307 says if the government incurs over expenditure outside that which has been approved by Parliament, it must bring a bill to Parliament within 60 days from the date that they became aware of the over expenditure. Now, this bill was brought in November of 2019, years, not days, years outside the 60-day period. So the opinion we want is whether it is possible to bring the condonation bill years after the 60-day period described in Section 307. And what happens and what should happen if the government fails to bring that bill within the 60 days. So we agreed that they would seek an opinion from the Attorney General, and we as a committee would also seek an opinion from the Council to Parliament, which we in fact have done. So in the past weeks, the ministry officials have firstly they gave the excuse of COVID, and then later on last week they gave the excuse that the opinion from the auditor, from the Attorney General is not read. We then wrote to them and said, yes, we are aware about the opinion, but the critical issue that we want from you are the timelines in respect of which you will complete the disaggregation process, and then you will forward the books of accounts capturing the 10.6 billion US dollars to the Auditor General. We note with regret that today, the 21st of September 2020, we received a letter signed by Mr. George Guvamatanga, in respect of which he basically said they are too busy completing the National Development Strategy, and also they've started preparations for the 2021 budget. Therefore, they are able to appear before our committee. We find the attitude of Mr. George Guvamatanga very disrespectful, very contemptuous of this committee and therefore of Parliament. Parliament has got the role of oversight codified in Section 119 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe over every body, every constitutional body, every public body, every ministry. As a matter of fact, when they wrote their letter and advised that they, in a case or incident of COVID in the Ministry of Finance, we agreed to stop and hold in abeyance our work for essentially 5-6 months, while we gave them the benefit of the doubt, to then continue receiving a harvest of excuses. This committee, we will not accept that, and we are putting our foot on the ground. This is not the first time that we have received such contempt from Mr. George Guvamatanga. Our first report to Parliament on the omissions of the Ministry of Finance actually censored the same Mr. Guvamatanga after we had challenges in securing his attendances when we were doing that inquiry. Not just him, but also the former Accountant General, may his soul rest in peace. Our report also censored the former Accountant General. So the unanimous decision of this committee to issue a warrant of arrest or a warrant of contempt in terms of the Parliamentary Privileges Act, summoning Mr. George Guvamatanga and his officials to appear before our committee on the 5th of October 2020 at 10:00 hours. And if he fails, then there are consequences already defined in the Parliamentary Privileges Act, and so the law will follow the course. The warrant is issued under the hand of the clerk, and we are advising the clerk to issue the warrant. However, on what we have collected already, and given that even if if the ministry does its work, it's going to be some time before the $10.6 billion is now audited by the Auditor General. We foresee this happening next year. We are going to write an interim report